we good? Can we hear each other?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I hear everybody good.
All right, we should be live. All right, welcome to ACAB Radio. I'm your host, Jay Lyfer, Kelly Special K Patterson, and King Ron. And we got a very special guest on the show today, Whitney Webb with Mint Press News. Hello, Whitney.
Hello. Thank you for having me on.
Welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back. Right.
Sure.
For those of you that don't know, Whitney was on the show before. I forget which episode it was, but yeah, check out the podcast either on your favorite podcast app or YouTube or here on Facebook and search ACAB Radio Whitney Webb. It was definitely a great episode. So thank you for coming on again. The article that we want to focus on is Whitney's Newsguard article. That clip that we just played gave a bit of context about it. There's an RT clip that I also want to play where they got a little more into it, so I'm going to play that real quick.
Back. Combating disinformation, something that's become a new crusade. The latest weapon to appear in that battle is a plugin. It's called Newsguard. It ranks websites according to perceived trustworthiness. But can the plugin itself be trusted? Either Petrenka takes a look.
In case you didn't know, the words plug-in don't only refer to doing this, but the one-word option is actually a handy extension for your internet browser. And now there's a great plug-in to help you navigate through the world of fake news. It's called Newsguard. It won't ping up fake news alerts like the anti-virus software when you click on a story link. For now, Newsguard provides descriptions for news sources, not individual articles or stories. Right here, you can see what it looks like.
Our green-red ratings signal if a website is trying to get it right, or instead has a hidden agenda, or knowingly publishes falsehoods or propaganda.
So there's a whole rating system with as many as 9 criteria. Stuff like the responsibility of journalists or telling apart news from opinion, to name a couple. So who are the champions in being as green as you can get? The New York Times or the Washington Post, with a perfect record for all 9 categories. Despite having been caught for publishing lies, and it wasn't a one-off, Newsguard will tell you they're nowhere near being repeat offenders. Now, someone would definitely call that fake news. So technically, what makes the alerts switch from green to red, or vice versa?
We use humans, not algorithms, to identify unreliable news, because we believe our work should be done with transparency and accountability.
I knew it. It's up to human beings paid on job. Oops. One of Newsguard's biggest investors, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, was blamed for turning out fakes. The Newsguard Advisory Board is also worth having a look at. It features esteemed men like the former director of the CIA and NSA, the first Secretary of Homeland Security in the Bush administration, Barack Obama's former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. By the way, Richard Stengel once said,
I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population, and I don't necessarily think it's that awful.
With these folks running the show, it's pretty easy to guess if RT falls into the red or green territory. So go download that plugin ASAP and always be cautious when you read RT or anything else Newsguard's turned tomato red.
I, just for fun, downloaded the app in preparation for this interview, and I looked at latimes.com, which is the website of the Los Angeles Times, which gets a green rating, which means that the website is considered trustworthy and usually prints true and verifiable information. Now, I'm personally suing the Los Angeles Times right now for defamation and libel because they printed lies about me. So I know that the rating is not 100% reliable for firsthand. So that was my test.
Yeah.
The leadership of Newsguard is unfortunately people who have kind of a fraught relationship with the truth in the past, and who have way too many ties to the establishment, and particularly to what we would call the deep state here in the United States. Former CIA and NSA people, I would say, are pretty much like the last people you would want to see create this kind of app.
Free speech activist Eric Brose believes that Newsguard is merely a tool to support pro-government media in the West.
The main thing that I think makes Newsguard different, or at least what they're promoting is different, is the fact that they're not relying on Facebook's algorithm or Google's algorithm. They're saying that they are a team of veteran journalists who has better judgment than a algorithm or AI. When you really start to look at Newsguard and see who they're funding and who's on board and who they're associated with, and also just looking at the judgments they have put out for different websites, it's pretty clear that the websites that they're approving have an establishment bent. It seems to be serving the Western military industrial complex. You have the Council on Foreign Relations, you got former CIA members, you got former Bush members, and that's why you're going to see these unfavorable ratings towards independent news voices or somebody like RT who challenges the American narrative.
All right, for everybody tuning in, if you could help us break through the algorithms by either posting where you're viewing from or liking or sharing the post, that'll help us out, because I just tried to share the post. I don't know if you can see it, but I tried to share it on my phone. It says, "You're temporarily blocked. It looks like you were misusing this feature." So
there we go.
Looks like you're using the share feature to share stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Man, that was a heck of a rogues gallery that they had up there.
Well, it's funny because I wonder if the New York Times is going to get a green one, even though they had people on the payroll pumping out the fucking 9/11 stuff and getting us into the war that hasn't ended since then.
Yeah, they are. They're green.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, they were rated green. Washington Post was rated green. I think even BuzzFeed was rated green.
That's laughable.
CNN is rated green. Fox News is rated green.
Yeah.
It's pretty much across the board. Establishment outlets that really, toe the government line, or the establishment line, if you will, that are rated green consistently. And there's some pretty good examples to point out just how biased Newsguard's rating system is. So the best example that I've seen is that they gave WikiLeaks a red rating.
Yeah.
And the reason they said that they gave WikiLeaks a red rating was because they don't regularly correct false information on their page. But they also admit that WikiLeaks has never published false information. So basically, they give them a failing rating because they've never had any errors to correct, which is really, really absurd, and also speaks to the fact that, the quote deep state people on the board of Newsguard really are, some of the same people who don't want you reading WikiLeaks.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason they're rated red in that case. Another really clear example, in my opinion, is the fact that they give RT red, but they give Voice of America, which is the U.S. Funded news organization that's often been called propaganda. They give that a green because they claim that people that work for Voice of America sign a code that says they do not speak for the U.S. government. But I mean,
right?
That's really,
there we go.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense, especially if you read their description of RT. They just say they dismiss RT as propaganda just by virtue of the fact that they receive funding from the Russian government, but they don't do the same for Voice of America. So I think those are some of the clearest examples of the clear bias in Newsguard's rating system. Even though they claim, we're humans, we're not algorithms. I mean, obviously humans can be biased. It's important to keep that in mind when looking at Newsguard.
Yep. Yeah, well, RT should put up one of those disclaimers saying that they're not speaking for the Russian government.
Yep,
when I get home, I'm going to put one up on the Nevada Cop
I'm
Block
pretty
site.
sure they have that as well. It's just that Newsguard chose not to mention that. They just said everything RT puts out as part of a Russian propaganda effort because that's the establishment narrative. Because the people behind Newsguard are establishment journalists. I mean, one of their CEOs, Louis Gordon Krovitz, he was publisher of the Wall Street Journal. He was also in charge of the Dow Jones on Wall Street for a really long time. And this guy is also, it's interesting to point out that he has a history himself of publishing fake news. So, for example, he claimed that there was no involvement of the government in the creation of the internet in a 2012 Wall Street Journal opinion piece. And the people he cited eventually came out not that long afterwards and said that he was wrong, that Krovitz had twisted their words and had basically just made up a lot of the assertions he had made in his article, which he never retracted. So it's pretty impressive that this guy claims to really care about truth and honesty and integrity in journalism, considering that he has repeatedly been accused of just making stuff up. He was also accused by the Electronic Frontier Foundation of repeatedly getting his facts wrong on NSA surveillance, because instead of, accurately noting that NSA surveillance is a huge violation of the constitutional rights of American citizens, he said that the documents actually showed that the NSA has so much accountability and so much oversight, which really misses the point and makes no sense. So, I mean, he's clearly an apologist for the establishment. And, that's, and we can go more into the people behind Newsguard in detail, but just looking at him, who, Krovitz is one of the co-founders, the co-CEOs or co-executives, and he's also the top investor in Newsguard. So it's important to talk about him and his role in this.
Boy, absolutely. Him being a member of the Council on Foreign Relations is like what sealed the deal for me. It's like, I'm not going to listen.
Should be a red flag, right? But another red flag there is that he openly promotes on his bio on the Newsguard webpage that he's part of the that he associates with the American Enterprise Institute. If you may not know that think tank by its name, but you'll certainly know some of its most prominent members in recent years, like Paul Wolfowitz, who was the architect of the Iraq War, or John Bolton, who up until he became Trump's national security advisor, was a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. And it's basically a massive neocon think tank. At one point during the George W. Bush administration, it employed 24 positions in that administration were filled with people from this think tank. And so the fact that this guy is promoting himself and is like proud to admit his association with this group should, really concern us. Should really concern those of us who are independent media outlets who are really anti-war. Another reason why anti-war outlets should be concerned is because investors in Newsguard are really connected to the military-industrial complex. One of them, John McCarter, was a top executive at Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a top government contractor for a really long time. Another one is Thomas Glosser, who used to be of Reuters, but he's also a Council on Foreign Relations guy. He's connected, interestingly enough, to the Atlantic Council. There's actually a couple Atlantic Council connected people. And I think I talked about this last time I was on the show. The Atlantic Council is really influential on Facebook censorship algorithms. They're really involved in deciding who gets censored and whose pages got deleted last October. So it's important to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, another military-industrial complex tie that you pointed out in your article was Michael Hayden. He was a former CIA director, NSA director.
The guy that hired all those people at the New York Times.
Yeah, and he's on the advisory board. And he's got ties to the Chertoff Group, founded by Michael Chertoff, he's a board chairman of BAE Systems. So, yeah. Definitely a tie to the military-industrial complex there.
Another interesting thing, though, since you brought up Michael Chertoff, Michael Hayden, who's on the board, he's a principal at the Chertoff Group. But it's interesting because it sort of shows that, Michael Chertoff is also part of the Alliance for Securing Democracy, which is a really similar, sort of neocon enterprise that's aimed also at fake news. That also, previous to Newsguard, started up something called Hamilton 68 that some of us might remember because it and basically identified all these accounts that they wouldn't disclose who the accounts belonged to, but they said they were, Russian bots, and they didn't really explain why. And so basically any theme or story or topic, that these would tweet out was automatically claimed by Hamilton 68 to be a Russian propaganda effort, and sort of had this chilling effect on people talking about this particular issue, whatever it was. So it's sort of interesting. The more you look at Newsguard and Hamilton 68 and the organization behind it, you'll see that it's they're both driven by neoconservatives, and there's actually a lot of overlap. So I did an interview with Media Roots on Sunday, and we sort of
I love Media
had the
Roots.
feeling it was sort of a concerted effort here by neoconservatives to have these different phases, Newsguard being one, Hamilton 68 being another one, and there'll probably be more in the future that are aimed at really trying to eliminate independent media.
Yeah, and free speech in general, because you can't even say neocon anymore without being like a Russian bot or a Kremlin propagandist.
Yeah, that was Propernaut that said that, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. And they claimed that the term neoconservative was invented by like Russian trolls or something, which is really absurd because it was invented by like Irving Kristol, who's the father of William Kristol, who's the Weekly Standard guy and like super neoconservative, like in the 1940s or something. So apparently he was a Russian bot. It's good to know. But it's interesting actually talking about Propernaut. Propernaut was first promoted by the Washington Post actually, and it's really interesting how a lot of these mainstream media outlets like the Washington Post and the New York Times have been really involved in promoting things like Newsguard as well, and Propernaut before this. And I personally think that has to do with the fact that they're very eager to wipe out independent media as well. They really want to erase the competition because American trust among Americans in the mainstream media is at a historic low. Independent media was really successful in the 2016 election, and those big outlets lost the ability to exclusively control the narrative about certain topics. And I think they're really interested in maintaining onto not just their cash flow, but their power in the United States. So I think, that's why we've sort of seen them enter this symbiotic relationship with Newsguard, where Newsguard rates them highly, and they also promote Newsguard. Because if you look at Newsguard, like how they've been treated in the press lately, they're on this huge press blitz right now. It started really well. They've had a couple stories since they started in March of last year, but really in the past 2 months, I mean, it's been really excessive.
Yeah, I saw
they've had stories in all these big outlets: Bloomberg, Wired, Forbes, the New York Times. I think just last week they had one earlier several months ago on the Washington Post. The Boston Globe, all these other places are really promoting this as like the answer to fake news. So I think it's really important that we challenge Newsguard every opportunity possible and really point out how shady they are.
Absolutely. Yeah, they try to claim to be old school journalism, fighting fake news, and it's just it's so laughable. I did want to play one short clip. It's like a minute long from RT that ties in beautifully with what you just said. So 1 second.
Back. Combating disinformation, something that's become a new crusade. The latest weapon to appear in that battle is
Tobin, a campaigner for election reform, told us the US measures against RT are part of a broader campaign.
What our government is doing is not right. Is there a concentrated effort to push RT America out of the United States of America? Absolutely, as well as many, many other alternative media, of which I know many of the founders. RT America has been removed from YouTube's premium package in the US, blocked from advertising on Twitter. I know of many other alternative media outlets that are experiencing the same thing. A lot of these entities are controlled by the powers that be, Zuckerberg, Facebook. Powers that be control not only the two-party system, which is one party, Hollywood, the music industry, the media.
She forgot to use that hashtag #FuckZuck.
Right.
Yeah, so she made some good points there. There's some other people on the advisory board that we haven't quite gotten into yet. Tom Ridge was worked for Homeland Security for Bush. I don't know if you want
Right. I'd like to stop on Tom Ridge for a second because it's
Sure.
really interesting. Tom Ridge, when he was the first Secretary of Homeland Security, when it was created by the George W. Bush administration, he was the guy that made that color-coded terrorist warning system, right? And so I think it's kind of interesting that Newsguard also has this color-coded rating system, and that I sort of see this kind of like I don't know, it makes sense, I guess, that Tom Ridge would be on the advisory board. He really likes things that are color-coded and manipulative.
Absolutely. Also, I think we got into Michael Hayden, but there's Richard Stengel. He was another one that you talked about in your article.
Right. So he's another one of these Atlantic Council guys. He's a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. And he also used to be editor of Time magazine. But what I'd like to focus on right now is that he was Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy under Obama. And he actually, in a panel hosted by the Council of Foreign Relations that was about fake news, he actually described his position under Obama, in the Obama administration, as being the, quote, chief propagandist for the Obama administration, which I think is really interesting.
Right.
And at that same panel, he also basically said that, every country does propaganda. It's really not that bad, and propaganda has to be done. All countries, push propaganda on their own population. And he doesn't, and he said it's not that awful, which I think was really interesting to point out here. And it's also important to point out that one of the NDAAs, the National Defense Authorization Acts, I think it was 2013, but I'm not sure which year exactly, but it actually, one of the NDAAs that was recently passed within the past decade actually legalized the use of domestic propaganda against American citizens by the U.S. government, which had previously been outlawed after World War II. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting that Stengel would describe his role that way. I think it's very telling, actually.
Absolutely. Kind of hypocritical to be, the people that are screening your news for you saying that they're combating propaganda when this dude's saying, oh, I'm not against propaganda. I was the chief propagandist. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just the good propaganda.
And he was proud of that, which I think is really weird. He was like, oh, yeah, that's what I was. Why are you bragging about that? And then going, he said this as soon after Newsguard was formed. So it's like he was on the board of this, fact-checking, news ranking organization. But he's like, yeah, I was chief propagandist, and it was totally awesome. So I think it just speaks for himself. In my report, I linked to a video of him saying that at the Council on Foreign Relations panel. I highly recommend you take a look because it's ridiculous. Also, at the end of that panel, a man asked him about how propaganda has been weaponized against, countries in the global south, and he just freaks out and can't handle it, and he just storms off the stage and shuts the whole panel down.
Nice.
Let me see if I can play this.
Well, it is good to be in a dictatorship if you're the dictator.
Right. It's great to be the king.
Right.
Let me see if I can play this clip real quick. Hopefully it doesn't freeze up with my slow laptop.
So you'll be the last question, but I just want to weigh in on that for 1 second. So there's another word for master narratives. It's called history. Basically, every country creates their own narrative story. And my old job at the State Department was what people used to joke as the chief propagandist job. We haven't talked about propaganda. Propaganda, I'm not against propaganda. Every country does it, and they have to do it to their own population. And I don't...
Yeah, that's crazy. There's more to that clip if you guys want to check it out.
The thing about that is what he says isn't really wrong. I mean, everybody does propaganda. What propaganda really is a directed, use of the news. The problem is when you have alternative media, you fact check that, and you have people that are not tied to the government that are doing that fact checking. So you have access to alternative, research that can show whether they're actually just lying. So if you're using propaganda and you eliminate anybody who can refute that propaganda, that's the problem. Not just that propaganda exists.
Exactly.
I mean, there is actually good propaganda. As long as it's actually factual.
Well, I guess that you could make that case, but in this case here, the idea that this guy's on a board of an organization that claims to identify reliable from unreliable news, and one of their main points is they say that they poorly rate sites that promote only propaganda. It shows the dangers of that word. And I think, and all these people coming together, what Stengel means by propaganda isn't necessarily what you might mean by propaganda, and what you mentioned just a second ago. I think Stengel is talking about,
right. Well, that's the thing.
Other type of propaganda that's about sort of, as an example, manufacturing consent for America's wars abroad, things like that.
Well, that's the thing. If the government's putting out propaganda and nobody's checking that except the government, then that's a problem.
You have the wolf, guarding the hen house with this kind of stuff, and that's
for
a
sure.
huge issue.
For sure. And what's crazy to me is how they want to put Newsguard like as a default app already pre-installed, like in all new smartphones and computers, and then in public libraries. I thought that was crazy. Like, talk about controlling the narrative.
Yeah, shit you can't delete when you get on your fucking
phone. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because Newsguard has sort of promoted itself, especially when it's gotten criticism, mainly after this report was published. They've said, well, if you can ignore the ratings if you want, you don't have to download the plugin if you don't want to. But what's interesting is that that's not the ultimate goal of Newsguard. That's its current form, but that's not its end game. And this has even been promoted or actually directly stated by their other co-CEO, who I haven't mentioned yet, who's Stephen Brill. And he told the Boston Globe, I think it was in October of last year, he said, to quote him, the goal is to have Newsguard running by default on our computers and phones whenever we scan the web for news. And they've already started this. They have partnered with Microsoft, which is their first big partnership, but a partnership with Google is coming. But anyway, Microsoft has added the Newsguard app to be a built-in feature of its Microsoft Edge browser, which is, Internet Explorer, like their new browser that they're running. But what's interesting is that Microsoft, the partnership with Microsoft, is also being used to have Newsguard installed by default on all public library computers, and they're also going after universities and public schools. And this has already been implemented in some states. The first state to implement this was Hawaii. So currently, as of this past December, on every single public computer in Hawaii, Newsguard is installed. So anyone that doesn't have their own computer but relies on the public library computer for access to the internet, they will not really have a choice about whether or not they want to see Newsguard's ratings or not, which I think is important to point out. But, beyond the public library stuff and the universities and all that, which in my opinion are sort of aimed to go towards the newest generation, especially since they're talking about putting it in public schools, I think, the bigger goal here is to have it permanently integrated into Facebook and to Twitter, because, Facebook, as an example, has been under a lot of pressure from the mainstream media and the government about its fake news problem. And so, Facebook has paid a lot of money to have a team of people to supposedly stop fake news. They've employed a lot of fact checkers, things like that. They've partnered with the Atlantic Council. So what Newsguard is trying to do is they're trying to convince Facebook that by implementing their system into Facebook and co-integrating it, it would save Facebook a lot of money because they wouldn't have to have all these employees hired. And, it's a pretty convincing sell, to be honest. But, you can tell that they're really pushing this hard on Facebook right now because Newsguard and one of Newsguard's major investors, the Knight Foundation, they funded a poll that was conducted by Gallup. And that poll claimed as its top finding said that 89% of users of social media sites and 83% of Americans overall want social media sites and search engines, i.e. Facebook and Twitter and Google, to integrate Newsguard ratings and reviews into their news feeds and search results. But what that doesn't tell you is that the poll itself, if you read the fine print at the bottom, says that people were paid to participate, right? So everyone that answered this poll received money from these people from Newsguard. And it also says that the responses of the people who participated in the poll is not reflective of attitudes of the broader U.S. population. But they don't really care about that. What they're saying is they're trying to build this narrative that everyone wants Newsguard. So they're just using the part of 89% of users of social media sites in the U.S. and 83% of Americans want this. But it's very clearly an underhanded tactic to try and, like I mentioned earlier, manufacture consent to have Newsguard permanently integrated into social media sites.
Absolutely.
And, since Facebook, what Facebook has done with its fact checkers, that it's implemented in the past is that when those fact checkers flagged a site for being fake news, that would get buried in the newsfeed or would be deleted by Facebook. So one can assume that if they implement Newsguard, they will do the same. They will bury poorly rated sites in the newsfeed, or they will delete those pages altogether.
Yeah,
which I think is what we'll eventually see if this integration moves forward, which is unfortunately a likely possibility, especially considering that both Newsguard and Facebook have connections to the Atlantic Council.
Yeah, I think Facebook is already doing that to some extent, and it will absolutely get worse if they do carry out these plans. Some other statistics from that Gallup study that was funded by Newsguard, 63% would be less likely to share news stories from a red-rated site. So Mint Press News, the Free Thought Project, some of my favorite news sites, independent media sites that aren't beholden to anyone, all were given red ratings, right? Surprise, surprise.
Well, we don't know about Mint Press yet, but as of this Sunday, we were still being evaluated. But I don't really expect it
good luck
to
with
be
that.
a positive response, especially after my report on them. Actually, Manar, my boss at Mint Press, we were joking that they were going to invent a new color for Mint Press, maybe like a flashing red. Or,
Deep red.
Some other new color to say that we're just really bad. We're the worst. We'll see.
I did hear that they're coming up with a siren that they're going to use.
Yeah, you guys get the siren.
Yeah, that'll be us. We'll be the first siren site.
I think money is a big part of this, but also brand guard. So talk a little bit about the financial censorship and brand guard.
Okay, so brand guard to me is the clearest indication that Newsguard is about wiping independent media off the map, because what brand guard is about, so like Newsguard, the name sounds guardian of the news. Brand guard is the guardian of your brand. So basically what it describes itself is a brand safety tool where it tells advertisers, hey, you don't want your brand or your ads to appear on a site that's been rated fake news by our team of veteran journalists.
Yeah,
so basically what that does is, what BrandGuard does is it all the sites that Newsguard has rated poorly, it blacklists from advertisers. And this is really troubling when you consider the fact that one of the leading investors of Newsguard is the Publicis Group, which is one of the world's largest advertising and PR firms. It has a partnership with Google. Its clients are some of the biggest corporations in the world. I mean, basically the entire pharmaceutical industry, and McDonald's and Burger King, also the Saudi Arabian government. They've done work for them, which is interesting. Actually, the Publicis actually got in a lot of trouble because they exploited American veterans when they were trying to do PR for the Saudis about the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act and trying to get that repealed for the Saudis.
Corvus or something?
So, this is a really shady advertising group. But, the fact that they're so connected to Newsguard means that BrandGuard will probably have an effect. And because they're connected to Google AdSense is a really important lifeline for a lot of independent media sites.
Yeah.
And even though Google AdSense has already been attacking independent media, I talk about that some in my article. But anyway, this basically means that instead of that Google just can cut these pages off entirely, using BrandGuard as the excuse and Newsguard's rating as the excuse.
Yeah, so how are, independent news sites supposed to pay for journalists and, pieces to be done if they can't make ad dollars like everybody else, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's their intent,
right.
Absolutely.
Right, and basically what this will do and what this effort, so already Google AdSense is really trying to hit us hard and all that stuff, and reach has really been hit by social media. But, this is what all of this is really pushing independent media towards is crowdfunding. And it's really interesting that now there's being pressure placed on Patreon, pages like that, to cut off independent media sites. It's sort of starting with, it's only really so far been with, people like alt-right people, which is how, the social media purge started originally.
Yep, with Alex Jones.
Independent media, Free Thought Project, all of that was last October. And 2 months before that was when there was the coordinated removal of InfoWars. And so I think they usually use these hateable, to use a word, people divisive figures to sort of, test the waters, and then they go from there and they just wipe out everyone that doesn't toe the line.
Absolutely.
And so I think we're going to be seeing, I think it's going to be really important to watch what Patreon is doing going forward, because, stuff like brand guard and blacklisting sites from ad revenue, what that's going to do is make crowdfunding really the only lifeline. And so we're probably going to see attacks on that forthcoming as well.
Yep. I would recommend people look into Bitbacker. I think it was called bitbacker.io, where you can, it's like a Patreon, but with Bitcoin. So it's an alternative currency. They don't, they're not going to censor anyone like Patreon's already started. So something to look into. There were a couple, I think we already mentioned those. Blue Haven Initiative was the other investor that you mentioned that we haven't talked about yet.
Right. Well, the Blue Haven Initiative is like the venture capital, like impact investment fund, meaning it's like philanthropical in some way, or claims to be. It's from the Pritzker family, which is sort of like one of these oligarch families in the U.S. They're one of the top 10 wealthiest families in the country. Most people will know them as the family behind the Hyatt hotel chain. But they're also, at least recently, they usually back establishment Democrats and are big corporate donors to the Democratic Party. In 2016, they were the second largest financial contributor to Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. And let's remember then that obviously after Hillary Clinton's campaign failed, that's when all this stuff about fake news and the dangers of fake news came out. So it's interesting to see that connection there.
Yeah, absolutely worth pointing out. Yeah, I thought you did a great job with this article. You really got into the nitty-gritty and investigated all these people. Great work. Glad that you were able to come on. I know you're a busy person. You're a mom, so we don't want to keep you too long. So I do appreciate you coming on the show again to shed light on this. And hopefully, if enough people hear about it, and we'll fight back against it so we don't face this dystopian future where Big Brother is determining what's truth and what's right. And
we're there. So
yeah.
Well, if I can say something really quick, I think it's really important, as you sort of mentioned, that it's really important if you are concerned about Newsguard's connections to oligarchy and government. I think it's really important to try and point that out on social media and also on the feedback section of Newsguard's website as much as possible to let these people to put them on notice, to let them know that we know, about their conflicts of interest and their shady connections. Because this PR blitz that I mentioned earlier is really about image building for them, making them look like, this nonpartisan group of respectable and trustable journalists when they are not. And I think it's really important that people work to deconstruct that image and challenge it whenever possible. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just end on that. And thanks again for having me on your program.
Oh, I think there was, did you want to bring up the response to your article? That was in Folio?
Oh,
yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, so there was a piece, but apparently they got in touch with the editor of Mint Press, Manar Mukowesh, who's my boss. But before that, they claimed that Newsguard was being criticized by Kremlin-linked outlets, which apparently at one point also included Mint Press, which is not connected to Russia at all. So it's really interesting that my piece apparently generated this buzz of, the Kremlin is attacking Newsguard, and therefore that means Newsguard is legitimate sort of narrative, which is really absurd. I mean, the fact that, I wrote a piece on Mint Press, which isn't affiliated with any government, it's entirely independent and crowdfunded. The fact that, an article I wrote was cited by RT and Sputnik does not make the article Russian propaganda. That's just not how this works. And it was really nefarious on the part of this magazine to make that, to claim that was the case. And also what's interesting is that Krovitz, one of the CEOs of Newsguard, responded to my piece in this Folio thing, in this Folio magazine article. And he claims that, the people on the board of directors and the investors have no input on Newsguard at all. But actually, when Sputnik contacted another person who works for Newsguard, whose name I forget at the moment, he said they did. So it's really interesting that people at Newsguard don't even know what the heck is going on in their own company. So good job, guys.
Well, I do want to put out a disclaimer right now that in spite of my hat, I am not representing the Russian government. So just to be clear with that.
Right. Well, I mean, honestly, I think what we've seen a lot since 2016 is that every time there's a story they want to discredit, they just try and link it to Russia some way, even if there is no actual link to Russia.
Yeah, they've been doing that for years.
Pretty much just been the standard for trying to shut down debate, because if you just say, oh, you're a Russian bot, then there's no need to actually engage with you about what you're saying. It's just sort of a way to try and close it down there. And that's what these people are doing. So hopefully I struck a nerve, and I hope their plugin fails.
Yeah. I hope it does too. All right, well, definitely check out this article, guys. Newsguard Eposed by Whitney Webb on Mint Press News. Thank you again, Whitney. Appreciate having you.
Thank you so much.
All right, you have a good day.
You too.
All right, how do
Man, I mean, from when I was younger, they've been using Russia as a boogeyman. You know, and then they kind of got away from it for a while, and were using terrorism and terrorists as that boogeyman to push an agenda. And right back to the Russians again.
Yeah.
They get a lot of mileage out of Russian propaganda.
It's like the Red Scare or, you know, McCarthyism
well,
all
that's
over
true
again.
even before my time. You're right. My parents' time, they've been using it.
It's a tactic that works. They know it works, so they continue to use it. So,
I think we'd wise up by now.
Time to get into the police accountability side of this.
Squeaky pigs.
We should paint this like black so that we can have our Russian pig.
Well, I'm still waiting for our listeners to send us a little uniform for the pig.
Yeah, we need uniforms.
And a little hat. You know, we also have a naked pig, so.
Yeah, I did want to mention this article by the Free Thought Project, the Common Ground Summit. So a bunch of us that have been affected by censorship did get together to try to, you know, brainstorm, come up with ideas to combat this censorship. Rachel Blevins was there. She did this little piece on it, so I'm going to play that real quick.
It has been 3 months since Facebook launched a sweeping purge that targeted hundreds of pages and accounts. And while the claim was that they were simply guilty of violating Facebook's spam policies, dozens of the journalists and activists who were impacted believe that there is more to the story.
On October 11th, 2018, some of the leading names in alternative media were taken down by Facebook and Twitter.
We were both wiped off of Facebook the same day and Twitter. And we got a strike on YouTube. So this is a multi-platform move.
The Free Thought Project had more than 3 million followers when it was deleted, and its co-founders say that they believe the targeted attack is setting a dangerous precedent for the free press.
So if they're taking down an operation like the Free Thought Project, it just kind of goes to show that they have no concern as to actually connecting people, to actually sharing information on their platform that's going to help people understand the reality of the world we live in, especially this country we live in.
The anti-media had more than 2 million followers on Facebook when it was taken down, and its founder pointed to a coordinated effort to control the voices that were questioning the establishment.
They're afraid that if they don't get control of the narrative, that there is going to be a continuation of unpredictability, and that's not good for their markets. And that's why they're censoring people like us, because we're not captured by the military-industrial complex.
But even in cases where the pages were not deleted altogether, alternative news outlets have reported seeing their reach drop significantly on Facebook following the platform's partnership with the Atlantic Council.
We saw an immediate decline of our readership because of Facebook and Google's partnership with some of the most notorious government officials and neoconservative and neoliberal think tanks.
Mint Press News has more than 400,000 followers on Facebook, but its founders said that readership dropped more than 60% after Facebook began its alleged war on fake news.
It's an attempt to control the free flow of information by these tech giants who have basically been contracted by our government to infringe on our civil liberties, to infringe on our First Amendment right to free speech. And they're doing this under the guise of fighting fake news.
Instead of giving in to the social media giants, these journalists are refusing to back down.
The demand is there. They could continue to delete us. They continue to remove our fans, but they're never going to kill the demand.
In an effort to fight back, dozens of journalists and activists came together this weekend for the United for Common Ground Summit, where they proposed solutions and pledged to work together in the face of adversity.
We need something outside of these two heads that just argue and fight each other all the time. Because once you break free from the left and the right, you actually begin thinking for yourself.
While targeted censorship from platforms like Facebook has left these journalists without the income they once had and fighting to keep their organizations afloat, there is hope that by coming together, they can help to protect the future of independent media. Reporting from Houston, Rachel Blevins, RT.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we do have to do another disclaimer. We are not in any way representative of ZZ Top.
Yeah,
for the record.
Every time we open it up for comments here, we got Darren Melia from Liverpool, UK. Are you sons and granddaughter of ZZ Top? Who's the granddaughter?
and I would like to know, have you never seen Duck Dynasty?
Yeah, that was the last one.
Is there another
Duck Dynasty?
Yeah.
Fuck Duck Dynasty. I'm just going to go on record saying that.
I could neither confirm nor deny any connection to Duck Dynasty.
Looks like a lot of people from Liverpool. Yusef, Mustafa, Trish Priori.
They're all doing beard jokes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I just want to shout these people out real quick.
Yeah, thanks for commenting, guys. Even if it's, fun and silly stuff, we do appreciate it. Let us know you're listening, and that means a lot.
Yeah.
We fight every day for what we do here, and at any moment it could be taken away.
Yeah, we're growing these beards for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So ACAB Radio was a part of that summit, meeting for common ground, because we're definitely feeling the effect. Like I said, when I tried to share this out, they disabled my ability to share this live broadcast into police accountability groups. So that's crazy. Here's another clip about how this has affected police accountability pages in particular.
Former Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke is scheduled to be sentenced later today for the shooting of 17-year-old Laquan McDonald. You probably remember this video. It's pretty horrible, really. The shooting occurred more than 4 years ago when McDonald was hit with 16 bullets in the middle of the street for brandishing a 3-inch knife. It's one of the many cases that some Americans point to as police abuse, especially in minority neighborhoods. But unfortunately, some of these groups who keep tabs on police accountability are being purged by Facebook themselves and other social media sites. Here's RT's Rachel Blevins with this important story.
From shocking bystander videos to heart-wrenching body camera footage, social media has been the driving force for police accountability in America. That is, until 2018.
Police the Police, Cop Block, Filming Cops, and Cop Logic were all included in a Facebook purge that publicly claimed to target pages that were violating the platform's spam policies. But with it came the largest collection of police accountability resources on the internet.
Nothing has actually held police more accountable and done more for police reform than a viral video. So if they take away that opportunity for those videos to go viral, people aren't going to know what's going on.
Police the Police was the largest page with nearly 2 million followers before it was taken down by Facebook, and its founder is now concerned about how the lack of resources will impact police accountability efforts.
Local media doesn't have any incentive to try to cover those types of stories because they're actually friendly with their local police departments. If the police start to feel betrayed by their local media, then they'll be less likely to actually share information.
But without the pages dedicated to police accountability, we wouldn't hear stories about people like Roderick Talley.
No one would listen to him. He tried to get his story to local media and everything, and this guy's an American hero.
Talley's front door was blown off of its hinges and his apartment was raided by a SWAT team over false information from an informant who claimed Talley purchased cocaine from him. The only problem was that Talley had recorded everything with his home security system. His footage included a visit from the informant who knocked on the door and then left without selling any drugs, followed by an undercover officer who came by to confirm the location.
None of these cops are held accountable. So now if we suppress that even more so, like what Facebook and Twitter is doing with us, and these videos aren't allowed to be seen, then what's the result of that?
There is also concern that by stifling major police accountability pages, Facebook is helping to protect corrupt officers and departments.
When the mainstream media or the social media censors that, it kind of highlights the coordination between the mainstream media and the social media and the state.
In addition to targeting pages that share footage of police encounters with citizens, Facebook is also censoring pages like News to Share, which live streams protests and arrests.
Have that raw footage where you're able to see the officer's badge number and that kind of information that they're going to make as difficult as possible for people to see if you trust them to just release it on their own.
But the journalists and activists behind the police accountability effort refuse to give up.
It's probably more important than ever to have independent media, because every tyrannical regime throughout history, one of the first things they want to do is to get rid of independent voices and independent press.
With no response from Facebook and no indication that the pages will be restored, it has left many journalists and activists wondering how they will continue to hold police accountable in 2019. Reporting from Houston, Rachel Blevins, RT.
That was a pretty good video clip there, and that's definitely true. And this is what we fight. That's our fight. They mention us, and it frightens me. I mean, I don't know what we can do. We do what we do now, but at any time that can stop. We won't stop when we go out and record. However, being able to get that information into the hands of the public and to the people, it's going to become tougher and tougher for all of us.
Yeah, and meanwhile, at the beginning of that, they showed Laquan McDonald getting murdered on video in the street by a cop, and he got his sentence over the last week, and he got like 3.5 years for murdering somebody on video.
Yeah, here it is right here. Ex-cop Jason Van Dyke sentenced to 6 years, 9 months in the murder of Laquan McDonald,
which
translates into what you said.
Right, and that's the reason why we need to have people following these cases and scrutinizing the results.
Right, because the police will write the narrative.
On top of that, it took 2 years to get that video released, and the Chicago Police Department and the mayor cited that it would cause unrest within the city if they release that video. And the reason is because you clearly see somebody being murdered on video.
By the authorities, absolutely.
So if there weren't people there fighting that and keeping that video in people's minds and forcing them to release that, he'd be standing out there on the streets waiting to murder somebody else right now.
That's right. Nothing would have happened. He would have got a pass, which often happens, sometimes even with video.
Well, the officers that were involved in the cover-up, they did get a pass. The 3 officers were found not guilty.
And they didn't even charge the cops that went into the Burger King and deleted the video from there.
Yeah.
So.
Right. I mean, they were conspiring to cover up their own crimes, and they got a pass. So
we got a comment here. Joe, I'll butcher your last name. So Joe commented, Facebook is not the entire internet. Keep using the web, YouTube, Reddit, etc. I agree. It's not the whole internet, but you got to realize that it is the most powerful social networking platform. Most people are on Facebook. That's where you're able to reach the most amount of, normies, I'd call them, like people that you want to plant seeds. Like we can go to Minds, and we are going to move over to Minds.com, which is a censorship-free platform, but it can become these other platforms that people move to avoid censorship. They're already pretty aware and awakened
We're
already.
Preaching to the choir when we go there.
It can become an echo chamber. So the point is to stay on something like Facebook where we can reach the people that need to hear this kind of shit.
Yeah, I think that that should be the move, is getting off of Facebook, letting Facebook die and become the next MySpace.
Right.
Which is already in the process. It's just how long it takes.
You know what? Tom from MySpace never did stuff like this to us. We should have never left MySpace.
Yeah, I'm sorry, MySpace.
I'm sorry,
That's
Tom.
what I'm saying, man.
I do think Reddit is a really good platform to use. The biggest problem with Reddit is they have this idea that if you wrote something, it's spam if you share it, which I've never understood. Like if you post something that's relevant to a Reddit group that you're in, it shouldn't matter who wrote it if it's an actual verifiable article. So there's a lot of that.
To censorship.
So the thing is, you'd have to get somebody else to share it for you, and it's a lot of fucking behind the back nonsense that doesn't really need to happen. But so that was the thing that made Facebook big, is that you could create a page and share your content, and people could look at it, and if they liked it, they could share it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they're eliminating. And that's, I think they're, cutting their own throat doing that, but at the same time, they're doing incredible damage to the reach that, independent media had as a result of that.
Yeah.
Anybody else say anything? It's getting interesting. I kind of like this back and forth with the comments.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Could somebody criticize us so we can fight with you?
Yeah. Get a haircut. Get a job, you dirty hippie.
Right.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Somebody.
It might be good advice.
I didn't see all his comments, but Johnny Doe. Most people in Liverpool are extremely left-wing, so I find it strange they would be watching unless this is genuinely an underground communist channel.
Our channel.
Yeah, I guess.
We're not that far underground, but we're not communist, really. But
yeah, that's not our lean.
That's not our official policy. I'm not going to speak for other people, but I'm not a communist.
And I will say the same. I'm not a communist here.
And realistically, like the left-wing, right-wing bullshit is another way to divide people. And really, you should take news, and you should fact-check it and make sure it's accurate. But you shouldn't discount something just because a right-wing person put it out or a left-wing person.
Or, as well as, right-wing, left-wing, two wings of the same bird.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. There is another article I think worth mentioning. I'm sure everybody's heard about this. This was a cop trying to shoot a dog. And shot his partner.
It's our feel-good story of the day. I love it.
Did they charge the dog with that?
That's right.
Usually when they're shooting at a person and they shoot each other, they charge that person.
Or the homeowner.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm surprised they didn't. So check this out. Then the officers, the department came out in defense of the officers. Like, oh, no, it wasn't negligence. Look at this. Tell me this wasn't negligence.
Oh! Whoops.
What happened?
See, now somebody's got to research and see if them guys have an issue.
Oh, yeah. Can we do that in slow motion?
Yeah, one more time for the people in the back.
Right? Oh, slow it down. Slow it
Through
down.
the door, too. Watch that.
Boom!
She's like, God damn.
What happened?
This is the guy.
It's good that he plays dumb afterwards. Like, what happened? I didn't feel that gun go off in my hand.
Yeah.
Well, so look, let me show you again. He's not the one that shot. It's this guy on the right. He's got the gun in his hand. He shoots through the door and hits her. There it goes.
Yeah, I'm sure if you look at the level.
So somebody reached around that guy.
Right. He heard a dog coming, but the dog would have been over 6 feet tall because of where it was shot.
That's what I'm saying. Somebody's got to figure out whether they had some
maybe
kind
they
of
thought
fight
it was
in
a
the coffee
bear.
room or something.
I'm not sure what he was thinking.
Just crazy. Man.
One
more time.
Look, I'm all in favor of pigs shooting pigs. I applaud this cop.
Cop on cop crime.
I think he did a fine job. I hope he keeps it up. There's probably plenty of other officers in his squad. Go at it, man. You got my support. Got my support.
Oh, now they're doing the taser.
Speaking of taser too, nice. Hey, we already shot it. We might as well go the full route.
Well, that's what he said. He's like, did I tase you? No, motherfucker. You shot me with that gun in your hand.
Yeah, what part of the powder that you don't smell? Yeah, did you see it splattered when he hit you? You had the clothing in the back,
that's pretty
puff.
Funny.
So
I like the I saw it, not to use a pun, and I don't know if this even qualifies as a pun, but it's like the Pavlov dog. It's like they hear a dog bark and they just shoot.
Shoot.
It don't even matter where they're fucking.
No,
going.
the dog was locked up. That's the thing, and the dog was just barking. I don't know if it got out of the cage, but I didn't see the dog in the body cam footage.
No, but they hightailed their asses out of there.
So we got to wrap this show up here, but there are a bunch of articles that we didn't get to.
Oh damn, we're gonna have to put on.
Just let me at least
or
read some
bad news
headlines
is the
here.
way you want to.
Facebook is forcing us to wrap up. So fuck Zuck.
L.A. County
Hashtag.
Sheriff reinstates deputy fired over domestic abuse and stalking. Oh, so a domestic abuser and stalker reinstated in L.A.
That's the job you want that guy in.
Married corrections officer arrested after she was caught on camera having sex with a prisoner.
Yeah.
Oh.
There we go. Abuse of power once again.
And she was married.
Yep. I mean, there was quite a few child molestation cases this week that I came across. Boy, sick stuff.
Yeah, I think I put them in here. We'll get there real quick. Deputy arrested for buying drugs from undercover detective. Oh, cops buying drugs. Cop busted a cop.
Yeah.
Cop shot a cop. Cop on cop crime. Violent man on life support after violent arrest. Clearing out homeless camps.
There we go.
I didn't have a chance to watch that. Superstar DEA agent made millions off cocaine traffickers.
Right. Yeah, that was a good
DEA
story.
agents selling drugs. Woman who posted about Trump slams on Secret Service agent.
That's a good video.
U.S. judge rules that feds can't force fingerprint or face phone unlock. So if a cop ever says, here, unlock your phone, or he tries to do the Face ID with your new fancy Apple phone, they can't do that legally.
Well, they can't, but they can still. I mean, they grab you for the fingerprint ID.
That's a new
They have
development
control.
because just before that, they used to say
They
that
were.
It was allowed.
They couldn't force you to use your password, but they could force you to use the
Your fingerprint.
or the face
That's
recognition.
right.
Dude, there was a case where they had gone and a guy that they killed went and used his dead fingerprint to unlock his phone.
Yeah, that they're.
So they can't do that kind of shit.
That's why we
anymore
call them
legally.
pigs. I mean, they're disreputable.
Ex-Philly cop gets 3 to 12 months in jail for a fatal drag racing crash.
Dopey AS.
Oh yeah, these two. This was after that storm. They were in the police car, and the officers got out of the car van, were standing on top of it while they drowned inside. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was that story. Marine vet sues sheriff for forcibly stripping her, even though she was innocent. So she's innocent.
Right. The
stripped
story,
butt
you have to read
naked.
the entire story, man. It make your fucking blood boil.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those, super patriotic, that was a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
She was a veteran. So, don't think that you're protected because you served. They'll get you too.
I'm going to save this one for next week because there is footage of them shooting this 14-year-old boy I want to show you guys. So we will definitely do that. Yeah. We talked about that. This was shared on Cop Block's page. I'm going to save this for next week too because there's video of that as well. There's also video of that. I'm going to save that. Sheriff's deputy pleads guilty to stealing over $1 million in marijuana and cash. So stealing... Cops stealing all these drugs and money.
Stole some steroids too.
Yeah, obviously.
Is that the one where they said the rats ate it?
Probably. Here's another one. Newly elected sheriff arrested for stealing meth from the evidence room. Wow.
That's twice because there was a sheriff in Arizona that had to resign finally because he was up for opioids and had been arrested and got elected in the process of being charged, and then refused to resign, and they had to go in and force him out.
Wow. Here's another DEA agent gets probation for selling ARs to drug traffickers on the border. Got probation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is the one we're going to show next week. Teen running away. Here's the ones you were talking about, Ron. Sheriff deputy accused of molesting 15-year-old girl. That was a good article. Oh, shoveling snow. Yeah, land of the free. You can't even shovel snow without a permit.
Great, because I'm not getting a permit and I ain't shoveling no snow.
Oh, this was just disgusting. The 4 people that left water for people in, crossing the desert were convicted.
Yep.
Yeah, they could face prison time.
And they'll probably get more than Jason Van Dyke got for murdering Laquan McDonald.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. They do great work. I love that organization. Cop stumbling drunk, urine soaked when he plowed into vehicles going 70 miles an hour.
Never ending, folks. Story after story after story.
Let me play this real quick, dude. This is a tiny little girl that the cops pointed their guns at and were like,
Yeah.
"Put your hands up! Put your hands up!" Look at this little girl. Let me see if I can get this to work.
This is
hopefully.
I mean, you know, I don't know, like what you have to have in your chest, like a rock, if this stuff doesn't get your blood
This is actual
boiling.
audio from the video.
No, this isn't the video I saw. The video I saw, she was walking there like, "Put
Yep.
your fucking hands up."
Yep. Yep. I saw that video also. This isn't.
No, that's not it. Oh, this is the one right
There
here.
it is. Small technical difficulty. Please stand by.
She trying to get out. Oh, she did. Oh my God. She made cross road? No.
A local woman and her daughter shocked.
She trying to get out, but she can't because she little. She is out. Oh, she holding her hands
my
up.
God.
Oh my God. Look
Hands
at
up, don't shoot,
them.
right?
Oh my God.
And
They can't believe
How
it
sick
as
is
a
this?
toddler climbs out of a pickup truck.
See, this isn't the one I saw either. The one I saw was you could hear the cops, "Put your fucking hands up. Put your hands in the air," as this little girl's coming towards them.
The fact that that little kid even knows to put their hands up.
that's
is
what I'm
fucking
saying.
sad.
This is what we have to teach our children to keep them safe, even when they're toddlers, when they come in contact with these
not the one
fucking
he was
pigs.
This one's sad.
And there's no guarantee that you'll even survive obeying commands or trying to be, not being very passive. You could still die.
NYPD officer busted for selling marijuana in Brooklyn. Lake City
Ain't
police
nothing new there.
officer. Yeah, Lake City
Shit.
police officer arrested for child abuse exploitation.
Yep.
Just one after another, man. Thin blue line here again. London police officer accused of interfering in investigation on his friend's behalf.
That's for all our Liverpool fans.
That's right.
Tucson police officer arrested after allegations of sexual misconduct. Duluth police officer fired following his arrest. It's come out now in Brazil that the famous activist that was killed out there was killed by a Rio de Janeiro cop, which everybody suspected. But
Anyway, yeah, that was kind of not unexpected.
yeah, all right. So I think that's where we're gonna wrap it up here.
Yeah, great. I guess I could do my.
Yeah, we do want to mention Pet Food Not Bombs.
Yeah. We actually have ACAB Radio is proud to be sponsored by Pet Food Not Bombs, where we believe food is a right, not a privilege, and that goes for our animal companions also. No one should have to surrender their non-human family member because there's not enough food to care for them. We are excited to serve the people and their animal companions in the Las Vegas area. Find us on Facebook at Food Not Bombs and follow the link. You could also find that link on the ACAB Radio site. So if you would like to also become a sponsor on our show, get your group out there, drop us a line, and you too will also be mentioned on air.
Absolutely.
That'll be great.
Some events coming up tomorrow. La Lucha TPS 2019. It's a informative assembly. This is put on by the Ariba Las Vegas Workers Center. So it will be at the Ariba Las Vegas Workers Center on 1948 East Charleston Boulevard tomorrow at 6 p.m. Bliss does great work.
Yep, very fine person.
Definitely should reach out to her to see about having her on the show when we do our local
Local-
activist month. Yeah.
Yeah, what do you guys think about that? We're going to be doing a lot more local activists on the show. I mean, you guys are commenting. If you have any ideas of something that you would like to see us do, please comment. Let us know. I mean, we're here to serve you.
Absolutely. And then they're having their first anniversary at the Ariba Center.
Oh, cool. Boy, man, time
That's gonna
flies.
be-
Holy cow, it's been a year
yeah.
already.
January 25th, Friday, January 25th, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. again at the Ariba Workers Center. Radical Mental Health Meeting at Transcending the Gender Box, January 26th, Saturday, January 26th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Recycled Propaganda. He does some cool political art. He's just having his grand opening for his gallery. I'm going to try to make that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you live in the Las Vegas Valley, you'll see his stuff in a lot of the different businesses.
Yeah.
I was just up at Madhouse Coffee, and they had the work up there.
Vegination, too.
As well, Vegination.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of really cool stuff. Really inventive and imaginative.
For
and really,
sure.
Speaks.
So next week, we haven't confirmed a time, but we may be doing the show a bit earlier. Manar, the founder and editor of Mint Press News, is going to be joining us next week, so we'll have another very special guest for you. This is the article that will be the focus of that. Again, going into more detail on Newsguard, who is Newsguard, and really what their objectives are. So today we took a look at who they are behind it, and then we're going to talk with Manar about how they reached out to her and just the loaded questions they asked her, as well as get some history into Mint Press News so that you guys can hear the truth that Mint Press News is not a Kremlin group just because RT or Sputnik quotes some of their articles sometimes, you know. It's just ridiculous. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of hers. Got to meet her at that summit, and it was really cool. So stay tuned next week. We'll have her on. If you have any questions for her, you can ask questions, and we'll try to get to comments during the show.
Yep, that sounds like a plan. I like that idea.
All right. Thank you all for tuning in.
Hey,
Have a good
thank
day.
you, everybody.
Catch you next week.
Peace out.